Hey guys, Lord Naren White here, the Holy Ghost, the one true God. Back with you with the next video in my series, Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. Without further ado, returning to Great Expectations. Every hour so increased my abhorrence of him that I even think I might have yielded to this impulse in the first agonies of being so haunted, notwithstanding all he had done for me, and the risk he ran, but for the knowledge that Herbert must soon come back. Once I actually did start out of the bed in the night, and began to dress myself in my worst clothes, hurriedly intending to leave him there with everything else I possessed, and enlist for India as a private soldier. I doubt if a ghost could have been more terrible to me up in those lonely rooms in the long evenings and long nights, with the wind and the rain always rushing by. A ghost could not have been taken and hanged on my account, and the consideration that he could be, and the dread that he would be, were no small addition to my horrors. When he was not asleep or playing a complicated kind of patience, with a ragged pack of cards of his own. A game that I never saw before or since, and in which he recorded his winnings by sticking his jackknife into the table. When he was not engaged in either of these pursuits, he would ask me to read to him. "Foreign language, dear boy." While I complied, he, not comprehending a single word, would stand before the fire, surveying me with the air of an exhibitor, and I would see him, between the fingers of the hand which I shaded my face, appealing in dumb show to the furniture to take notice of my proficiency. The imaginary student, pursued by the misshapen creature he had impiously made, was not more wretched than I, pursued by the creature who had made me, and recoiling from him with a stronger repulsion, the more he admired me and the fonder he was of me. This is written of, I am sensible, as if it had lasted a year. It lasted about 5 days, expecting Herbert all the time. I dared not go out, except when I took Provis for an airing after dark. At length, one evening when dinner was over, and I had dropped into a slumber quite worn out, for my nights had been agitated and my rest broken by fearful dreams, I was roused by the welcome footstep on the staircase. Provis, who had been asleep too, staggered up at the noise I made, and in an instant I saw his jackknife shining in his hand. "Quiet! It's Herbert," I said, and Herbert came bursting in, with the airy freshness of 600 miles of France upon him. "Handel, my dear fellow, how are you? And again, how are you? And again, how are you? I seem to have been gone a 12 month. Why, so I must have been, for you have grown quite thin and pale. Handel, my halloa, I beg your pardon." He was stopped in his running on and in his shaking hands with me by seeing Provis. Provis, regarding him with a fixed attention, was slowly putting up his jackknife and groping in another pocket for something else. "Herbert, my dear friend," said I, shutting the double doors while Herbert stood staring and wondering. "Something very strange has happened. This is a visitor of mine." "It's all right, dear boy," said Provis, coming forward, with his little clasped black book, and then addressing himself to Herbert. "Take it in your right hand. Lord strike you dead on the spot, if you split it in any way somever. Kiss it. Do so, as he wishes it," I said to Herbert. So Herbert, looking at me with a friendly uneasiness and amazement, complied, and Provis, immediately shaking hands with him, said, now you're on your oath, you know, and never believe me on mine. if Pip shan't make a gentleman on you. Chapter 41. In vain should I attempt to describe the astonishment and disquiet of Herbert, when he and I and Provis sat down before the fire, and I recounted the whole of the secret. Enough that I saw my own feelings reflected in Herbert's face, and, not least among them, my repugnance towards the man who had done so much for me. What would alone have set a division between that man and us, if there had been no other dividing circumstance, was his triumph in my story, saving his troublesome sense of having been low on one occasion since his return, on which point he began to hold forth Herbert. The moment my revelation was finished, he had no perception of the possibility of my finding any fault with my good fortune. His boast that he had made me a gentleman, and that he had come to see me support the character on his ample resources, was made for me quite as much as for himself, and that it was a highly agreeable boast to both of us, and that we must both be very proud of it, with a conclusion quite established in his own mind. "Though, looky here, Pip's comrade," he said to Herbert, after having discoursed for some time, "I know very well that once since I come back for half a minute, I've been low. I said to Pip, I knowed as I had been low. But don't you fret yourself on that score. I ain't made Pip a gentleman, and Pip ain't a-going to make you a gentleman. Not for me not, to know what's due to ye both. Dear boy, and Pip's comrade, you two may count upon me always having a genteel muzzle on. Muzzled I have been since that half a minute when I was betrayed into lowness. Muzzled I am at the present time, muzzled I ever will be." Herbert said, "Certainly," but looked as if there were no specific consolation in this, and remained perplexed and dismayed. We were anxious for the time when we would go to his lodging, and leave us together, but he was evidently jealous of leaving us together, and sat late. It was midnight before I took him round to Essex Street, and saw him safely in at his own dark door. When it closed upon him, I experienced the first moment of relief I had known since the night of his arrival. Never quite free from an uneasy remembrance of the man on the stairs, I had always looked about me in taking my guest out after dark, and bringing him back, and I looked about me now, difficult as it is in a large city, to avoid the suspicion of being watched, and the mind is conscious of danger in that regard. I could not persuade myself that any of the people within sight cared about my movements. The few who were passing passed on their several ways, and the street was empty when I turned back into the temple. Nobody had come out at the gate with us. Nobody went in at the gate with me. As I crossed by the fountain, I saw his lighted back windows looking bright and quiet, and when he stood for a few moments in the doorway of the building where I lived, before going up the stairs, Garden Court was as still and lifeless as the staircase was when I ascended it. Herbert received me with open arms, and I had never felt before so blessedly what it is to have a friend. When he had spoken some sound of words of sympathy and encouragement, we sat down to consider the question. What was to be done? The chair that Provis had occupied still remaining where it had stood, for he had a barrack way with him of hanging about one spot in an unsettled manner, and going through one round of observances with his pipe and his black head, and his jack-knife and his pack of cards and what not, as if it were all put down for him on a slate. I say his chair remaining where it had stood. We'll go ahead and stop there for this week, as usual, I want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel. Light be with you all. Take care, and thanks again.